Some sci-fi movies aren't remembered for action. They're remembered for the feeling they leave behind. The 2000s gave us dark, unsettling stories filled with fear, mystery, isolation, and worlds that feel completely wrong. These films build tension slowly, through atmosphere, strange ideas, and the constant sense that something terrible is coming. Some are disturbing, some are chaotic, and some stay with you long after they end. Today, 10 dark sci-fi movies from the 2000s with unforgettable atmosphere. Doom. Doom takes the classic sci-fi horror setup and turns it into pure chaos. The story follows a squad of Marines sent to a secret research facility on Mars after all contact with the station is suddenly lost. At first, the mission seems simple. Secure the base, find survivors, and figure out what happened. But almost immediately, they realize something went horribly wrong. The station is covered in blood, destruction, and signs of violent experiments. And whatever was created there is still alive. As they move deeper into the facility, the mission quickly turns from investigation into survival. What makes Doom work is its atmosphere. The base feels claustrophobic, brutal, and completely hopeless, like a nightmare with no escape. Based on the legendary video game, the film became famous for its first-person action sequence, which still stands out today. Starring Carl Urban and Dwayne Johnson, it remains a raw and chaotic sci-fi horror ride. Cargo. Cargo is one of those sci-fi movies that builds tension slowly and keeps getting darker the longer it goes. The story follows a woman working aboard a massive cargo ship traveling through deep space. The mission is long and most of the crew remains in cryosleep for years while the ship drifts toward its destination. At first, everything feels like routine work, but after waking up alone earlier than expected, she begins noticing strange things. Sections of the ship feel abandoned. Systems aren't working the way they should, and there are signs that something happened while everyone else was asleep. The deeper she investigates, the more unsettling the truth becomes. What makes Cargo work so well is its atmosphere. It doesn't rely on monsters or constant action. The ship itself becomes the source of tension, huge, empty, cold, and filled with secrets. Splice. Splice starts like a scientific experiment and slowly turns into something deeply disturbing. The story follows two genetic scientists working on illegal experiments combining human and animal DNA. Their goal is simple: create a breakthrough that could change medicine forever. At first, everything feels like progress. But when they secretly create a living hybrid creature, things begin changing faster than they expected. What starts as curiosity quickly turns into obsession, and the more the creature evolves, the less control they have over it. What makes Splice so unsettling is that it mixes body horror with psychological tension. It's not just about an experiment going wrong. It's about how far people are willing to go when science has no limits. Starring Adrian Brody and Sarah Polley, and directed by Vincenzo Natali, it remains one of the strangest and most disturbing sci-fi horror films of the 2000s.
Disaster everyone warns about. A new species set loose in the world.
The Signal. The Signal feels like chaos from the very first minutes. The story begins when a strange signal suddenly spreads through televisions, radios, and phones, affecting anyone who hears or sees it. At first, nobody understands what's happening, but very quickly, normal people begin turning violent, irrational, and completely unpredictable, and the city collapses almost overnight. What makes The Signal so disturbing is that it's less about monsters and more about human breakdown. The signal itself is never fully explained, which makes everything feel even more unsettling. The film was directed by 3 different directors, each handling a separate part of the story, giving it a fragmented, unpredictable structure. That's exactly why it feels so strange, dark, brutal, and chaotic. The Signal is one of the most underrated sci-fi horror films of the 2000s. Daybreakers. Daybreakers takes the vampire genre and turns it into dark science fiction. The story is set in a future where a global plague has transformed most of humanity into vampires. Society still functions, cities are running, businesses are open, and technology keeps moving. But there's one huge problem. Human blood is running out, and without it, the entire system begins to collapse. At the center of the story is a scientist working to find a substitute before civilization falls apart. But the deeper he gets into the truth, the more dangerous everything becomes. What makes Daybreakers so interesting is how it treats vampirism like a scientific and economic crisis instead of just horror. Starring Ethan Hawke, Sam Neill, and Willem Dafoe, it builds a cold, dying world where everything feels like it's running out of time. It's one of the most underrated dark sci-fi films of the 2000s.
Get 'em to swap our places.
The Host. The Host starts like a monster movie, but quickly becomes much more than that. The story begins when toxic chemicals dumped into a river create a mutated creature that suddenly emerges and attacks the city. In the middle of the chaos, a young girl is taken by the creature. While everyone else sees it as a disaster, her family becomes convinced she might still be alive. And for them, it turns into a desperate rescue mission. What makes The Host so unique is how it blends genres. It mixes creature horror, family drama, dark comedy, and social commentary in a way that feels completely unpredictable. Directed by Bong Joon-ho years before Parasite, the film already shows his signature style. The monster's memorable, but it's the family at the center of the story that makes it hit harder than most creature films. Cloverfield. Cloverfield takes a giant monster attack and makes it feel terrifyingly real. The story follows a group of friends in New York during what begins as an ordinary night, until the city is suddenly hit by something massive. At first, nobody understands what's happening. Buildings collapse, explosions tear through the streets, and the entire city falls into chaos. But instead of following soldiers or scientists, the film stays with ordinary people trying to survive. And that's exactly what makes it so effective. Using a found footage style, Cloverfield feels immediate, raw, and chaotic, like you're trapped inside the disaster with them. Produced by J.J. Abrams, it became one of the most talked about sci-fi horror films of its time, especially because of its mystery marketing and hidden monster reveal. The creature is terrifying, but the real horror is how helpless everything feels. The Cell. The Cell is less about science fiction on the surface, and more about entering the darkest parts of the human mind. The story follows a psychologist who uses experimental technology to enter the subconscious of other people. When a serial killer falls into a coma, before revealing where his final victim is hidden, she's sent into his mind to find the answer. And that's where the film becomes unforgettable. Inside his mind, reality doesn't follow normal rules. Everything is distorted, surreal, violent, and deeply unsettling. What makes The Cell stand out is its visual style. It's one of the most unique-looking sci-fi thrillers of the 2000s, filled with imagery that feels like a mix of nightmares, art, and psychological horror. Starring Jennifer Lopez, the film remains disturbing, strange, and impossible to forget.
His world.
So she's made contact.
The Road. The Road is one of the darkest and most hopeless post-apocalyptic films of the 2000s. The story follows a father and his young son traveling through a dead world after an unexplained global disaster. There's almost nothing left. No society, no food, no safety, just ash, cold, and silent. Their goal is simple: keep moving south and stay alive. But every step becomes more dangerous. They face starvation, violent survivors, and the terrifying reality of what people can become when all rules are gone. What makes The Road so powerful is that it never focuses on how the world ended. It focuses on what's left after everything is already gone. Starring Viggo Mortensen and based on the novel by Cormac McCarthy, the film keeps its brutal realism and heavy atmosphere from beginning to end. It's not easy to watch, but impossible to forget.
Take one. Kill anyone who touches you, because that's my job.
Donnie Darko. Donnie Darko is one of the strangest and most unforgettable sci-fi films of the 2000s. The story follows a teenager named Donnie, whose life changes after he narrowly escapes a bizarre accident, thanks to a mysterious figure in a terrifying rabbit costume. The figure calls himself Frank. And from that moment, Donnie begins experiencing visions, strange events, and signs that reality itself may be starting to break apart. At first, it feels like psychological horror, but the deeper the story goes, the more it becomes about time, fate, alternate realities, and choices that may already be written. What makes Donnie Darko so powerful is its atmosphere. The entire film feels unsettling, dreamlike, and unpredictable, constantly making you question what's real. Starring Jake Gyllenhaal in one of his breakout roles, it became one of the biggest cult sci-fi films of its generation. And even after it ends, it stays in your head. And that was 10 dark sci-fi movies from the 2000s with unforgettable atmosphere. Some were strange, some disturbing, and some still feel ahead of their time. But all of them prove one thing: sci-fi can be far darker than most people expect. If you've seen any of these, let me know which one stayed with you the most. And if you know another dark sci-fi film worth watching, drop it in the comments.